All right, slight issue here. Juror number 2 told the bailiff that he overheard the media talking. The only thing that he heard was that they said that the Drejka trial was starting today and there were going to be multiple witnesses. So obviously there's no prejudice there, but anything that they tell the bailiffs in that regard, the bailiffs are going to tell me and I'll tell you. So I don't think we really need to do anything about that. Anybody want us to do anything about that?
Not from the defense, Your Honor. If that was the gist of it, I don't think that's an issue.
No, Your Honor.
Okay. By the way, the Drejka trial did state today we are having multiple witnesses. So I don't really see a whole lot of prejudice about that. All right, so let's go ahead and bring the jury in. Very good. All right, so Rhonda Klein's back on the stand. She's been placed under oath.
Hello.
Can you please turn to the jury and introduce yourself and spell your first and last name for the court reporter?
Rhonda Klein, K-L-E-I-N.
And how are you employed, ma'am?
Pinellas County Sheriff's Office, Forensic Science Division.
How long have you been employed with the Pinellas County Sheriff's Office?
Since November of 2000.
And have you always been with that particular section?
I have not.
Tell the jury about where you started with the Sheriff's Office and how you ended up being where you're at.
I started in the Property and Evidence Division, and I transferred to Forensics in 2004.
Okay. And can you just briefly tell the members of the jury about your background, training, and experience to be a forensic technician?
I have my 2-year degree through St. Pete College, and I got hired with the Sheriff's Office Forensic Science Division, and we have a 16-week training program called the FTO program, and then we have yearly trainings.
And as a forensic science technician, and we're not going to go through every single thing that you do, we had a witness before you, your duties and responsibilities to go out to crime scenes and videotape and photograph evidence?
Correct.
Also to collect evidence?
Correct.
Right. And if necessary, process the scene, meaning fingerprints, look for blood spatter, DNA, things of that nature?
Yes.
Okay. Were you dispatched on July 19th, 2018 to the Circle A store?
I was.
Okay. Were you the only forensic technician, or were there others that were dispatched as well?
There was others with me.
Okay. When you went to the scene, were you assigned any particular duties?
I was assigned photography.
Okay. So the next logical question would be, did you take photographs when you were out at the Circle A?
I did.
And what type of photographs were you taking?
Digital.
And did you take photographs of the general scene as well as specific items of interest?
I did.
When you were at the scene, did anyone, whether it's a detective or a deputy, point out to you some evidence, and that evidence being a shell casing?
They did.
And were you responsible, or was another technician responsible for documenting that shell casing?
I documented it.
Okay. And how'd you go about documenting it?
I photographed it on scene how it was, and then I collected it.
I'm going to show defense counsel State's Exhibit number 11 for identification. While I'm here, I'm going to show defense counsel State's Exhibit 15, A through G, 16, A through E, and 14, A and B that we previously discussed.
Judge, no additional comments other than what was presented at sidebar.
All right, so they are admitted at this point.
Okay, so just to clarify for the record, 14, 15, and 16 are then admitted?
Correct.
Any question with this? I'm showing it's been marked as State's Exhibit number 11 for identification. There is a forensic evidence label on here.
Yes.
Okay, now you indicated that you had collected a spent shell casing?
I did.
Okay, looking at this packaging, is this the spent shell casing?
It is.
Okay. And explain to the members of the jury how you go about collecting that casing and how it ends up to be in that bag.
I photograph it in place as it is on the scene, and then we collect it and we put it inside these slide boxes to protect it. and then once I'm done photographing it additionally at the office for close photographs of it and or processing of the item, it remains in the package it was collected in, and then we place it inside this bag to turn it into our property and evidence division, and we seal it with evidence tape.
All right. In addition, do you put your signature on here?
I do.
All right. And do you see your signature on State's Exhibit number 11?
I do.
All right. And other than the fact that other people have looked at this item for testing purposes, does it appear to be in the same or substantially same condition as the last time you had seen it?
It does.
May I have the witness open State's Exhibit number 11? I'm showing you what's already been admitted into evidence as State's Exhibit 10A through C. The shell casing that is in that box, that was in that bag, is that the shell casing that's depicted in these photographs?
It is. It's like hard. Slide out though, because it's like not coming undone.
So looking inside of the box, which is State's Exhibit number 11, do you recognize this object?
I do.
Okay, and is it the shell casing that you collected on scene?
It is.
This time the state would ask to move into evidence State's Exhibit number 7.
It's admitted.
And may I just briefly publish it for the jury? I'm not going to pass it around. You indicated that you took photographs, just general photographs, at the Circle A store, is that correct?
Correct.
Did you also take photographs inside the store?
I did.
And that was to depict the general location where Mr. McLaughlin was found, where he collapsed in the store?
Correct.
May I approach the witness with State's Exhibit 14A and B? I'm showing you State's Exhibit 14A and B. Do you recognize these two photographs?
I do.
And photograph A, is that the front of the Circle A store?
It is.
Okay, and what's depicted in photograph B?
Just directly inside that set of double doors, right in front of the register where he landed.
Okay, and where he was, that's obviously where the pool of blood is that correct?
Correct.
And do these photographs fairly accurately depict the front of the store as well as the interior of the store where Mr. McLaughlin had collapsed?
Yes.
This time, the state would move into evidence State's Exhibit 14A and B.
Yeah, I think it's already in, I think.
That's right, we put all of them in. May I briefly publish?
Yes.
Now, subsequent to your involvement on scene, were you asked to go to the parking lot at the Circle A?
I was.
And were you asked to go out there to measure the parking lot to see if it was level or if there was an incline or anything like that?
I was.
And when you went out there, did you bring any particular items with you?
I did.
All right, and what did you bring?
I brought my camera and this measuring thing.
Okay, and I guess the name of that thing would be the level, correct?
The level.
All right, and did you place the level in a particular area while you were at the Circle A parking lot?
I did.
And did you then photograph the level in different areas within the parking lot?
I did.
May I have the witness step down? Okay. Yes, if you want, you could bring your level. This is State's Exhibit 15A through G. And now looking at State's Exhibits 15A, obviously this is the Circle A parking lot that we've been talking about.
It is.
Okay. Can you see this over there? Okay. Would it help you if I moved it over that way a little? Or is it more? Okay. Is that good for everybody? All right. Looking at 15A, this rectangular area, is that the area where you were placing the level?
It was.
All right. And when you look at B, C, and D, are those photographs all a series?
Yes, they are.
And in looking at B, does that show where the level was at that particular location?
It does.
And so that's obviously the second box, so around here. Yeah. Okay. And you can just tell by looking at the photographs where the level was positioned. Is that correct?
Correct.
All right. Photograph C, what is that depicting?
I'm just getting a little bit closer to show how it has the bubble level right here.
Okay. And looking at D, so when you look at State's Exhibit D, is that showing the grade, so to speak, or any incline for photograph B?
It is.
Okay, and I guess the picture is self-explanatory. Can everybody see what the level depicts? Okay. Now, when you first started, was the level level?
Yes.
Okay, meaning that the bubble was exactly where it's supposed to be in between the two lines?
Yes.
All right. Looking at the series of photographs, which is E, F, and G, is that the next series of photographs?
It is.
And in looking at State's Exhibit E, where was the level placed?
Further up.
Okay, so B was maybe in the second box
Yes.
and then going into the third box.
Yes.
And then E is another box up.
Correct.
All right. And looking at State's Exhibit G, I guess it's awful self-explanatory. Can everyone see the bubble showing whether or not there's an incline? Were you also asked to measure a particular interview room at the sheriff's office? Is it a substation?
It's a substation.
Okay, and where's this sheriff's office substation?
In Dunedin.
And you were told that an interview of the defendant had taken place in interview room 239?
I was.
And in looking at State's Exhibit 16A, just document to show that this in fact was interview room 239.
Correct.
Looking at State's Exhibit B, that is the view going into the interview room?
It is.
And did you measure the walls from entryway? So looking at C, it would be this wall to this wall. Did you measure that distance?
I did.
Okay. And which photograph represents that distance?
D.
Okay. So approximately.
11 foot 1 inch approximately.
Okay. And again, that's walking in, seeing the back wall, and it's that distance.
Correct.
All right. Did you also measure the side walls from side to side?
I did from east to west.
Okay. And in looking at State's Exhibit C, that would be from this wall across to this wall.
Correct.
All right. And what was the measurement?
Approximately 9 foot 7.5 inches.
Okay. And when we look at D and E, is that just the photographs showing the exact measurements as you did them that particular day?
Yes.
Did everyone have an opportunity to see the bottom? Go back to the stand. I do want that. I don't have any further questions, thank you.
Cross-examination?
Supervisor Klein, correct?
Correct.
All right, Ms. Klein, were you, first of all, when was the photograph or the exhibit that's been identified as 16A through 16E, when was this taken?
August 7th of 2019.
Okay, so it wasn't until just, what, a few weeks ago?
Correct.
Okay. Same question as to State's Exhibit 15A through G. When was that? When were those series of photographs taken?
The same day.
Okay, so in terms of when you went out there, did you go out there alone, or were you given was anybody with you when you took these photographs?
I had Supervisor Anderson and two state attorneys.
Okay. And the two state attorneys would be these two gentlemen here?
Correct.
All right. And so you were not even present back when this incident first happened? You were not present at the crime scene?
I was.
Okay, you were.
I was the original photographer.
Fair enough. But it was a year later that these photographs were taken, correct?
Correct.
All right. Now, the one of the conference room, were you present when reportedly Mr. Drejka was interviewed in this same conference room?
I was not.
You were not present, okay. And was there ever a time, so in other words, these measurements were based on what somebody else told you to do, correct?
I was asked to respond out there and measure the room from side to side. Correct.
All right. Now, were you ever asked to go to the crime scene and do the same in terms of measurements and the bubbles and all that you just testified the day of the incident?
No.
All right. There's a ramp, if I could. And again, now we're addressing State's Exhibit number 15, I believe is at 15A. If you recall that photograph there?
Yes.
All right, you would agree there is a ramp there, correct?
There's a ramp, that sidewalk, the cement thing's a ramp.
Okay, in
In my
15A,
eyes.
correct?
Yes.
All right, the cement thing is a ramp.
Yes.
All right, that's presumably for someone who has a wheelchair, would park in the handicap spot and then use that ramp to access the store.
You would think.
Correct, right? All right.
Yes.
Were you asked to measure the depth or the incline of that ramp?
I did put the bubble level on the ramp and I did take a photo.
All right. Is that photograph represented in any of 15?
No.
All right. 15A, none of the photographs in 15A through G represent the slope of that ramp.
Not of that cement ramp.
Correct.
I only have it on the white hash marks.
Fair enough. But not of this white cement ramp.
Not in those photos.
Fair enough, okay. Now, was there ever a moment that you were asked to take photographs of the store where this incident happened and where things were recreated, where somebody played the part of the alleged victim and somebody played the part of the alleged or the defendant? Was anything like that ever done in your presence?
It was not.
You were never asked to measure perhaps where the actual parties were when the incident happened?
No.
Photographs of the room, again, depicted in 16A through E, were you ever asked to verify how the distance that was of the room, and going back to the crime scene ever to verify if in fact they were in fact accurate in terms of the distance that was, you know, wall to wall? Were you ever asked to go back to the crime scene and determine whether or not that in fact is consistent with the way things happened?
I just was assigned what I told you.
Fair enough. And again, you were not present when Mr. Drejka was interviewed in that room.
I was not.
All right. And I apologize if I asked you this. You were never asked to go back, or the day of, for example, the day of the shooting, and have the scene recreated with Mr. Drejka being present.
I was not.
You said you found one shell casing, correct?
Correct.
You found no evidence of any other shell casings around.
No.
And it's your understanding one shell casing is consistent with the one shot that was fired. Is that what you knew to have happened?
That's what I was told.
Fair enough. And do you have any idea of how many bullets or the capacity of the firearm that was used? Do you have any idea what the capacity was of that firearm?
I do not.
Oh. If I could have a moment, Your Honor.
You may.
That's all I think.
Give me a redirect.
Briefly, Your Honor. All right. You were asked if you went out to the original scene on July 19, 2018, correct?
Correct.
All right, and you did? You did go out to that scene?
Yes.
All right. And you said you took general overall photographs, correct?
Correct.
May I approach the witness?
You may.
All right, I'm showing, actually, may I have the witness step down?
You may.
I'm showing you states 9, A through D.
I'll be your easel.
Looking at states exhibits, I guess you can look at B, C, and D. Do those show the condition of the parking lot back on July 19, 2018?
They do.
All right. And you went back out to the scene, I don't recall exactly what date it was, but you just testified, you know, in the last month or so, correct?
Correct.
And that's when you used the level?
Yes.
All right. And looking at states 15, A through G, when you were out there, the parking lot wasn't repaved, correct?
No.
Right. There wasn't any regrading of the parking lot?
Didn't appear to be.
Okay. Did it appear to be the same exact parking lot that you had seen back on July 19, 2018?
It did.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
Thank you, ma'am. You may step down. State, please call your next witness.
Cory Nerzig.
Nice to meet you. Just stand here, face the clerk, and raise your right hand and take the oath.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm the evidence you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth so help you God?
I do. Sir, if you step this way, have a seat, pull yourself to the microphone and speak in a loud and clear voice for the court, please.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
After speaking with defense counsel, State's Exhibit 11 has already been admitted into evidence. State's Exhibit 8 has already been admitted into evidence. State's Exhibit 31 is a box that contained all the other live rounds that Deputy Smythe testified to. In speaking with defense counsel, they don't have any objection to us moving into evidence State's Exhibit 31.
Is that correct? That's correct, Your Honor. No, it's good.
Good afternoon. Can you please turn to the jury and introduce yourself and spell your first and last name for the court reporter?
My name is Cory Nerzig, Nerzig.
Back in July of 2018, were you working with the Florida Department of Law Enforcement?
Yes,
And today, do you work with the Florida Department of Law Enforcement?
no longer.
Okay. And was that on your own terms, or any particular reason you don't work with the Florida Department of Law Enforcement?
Yes, I left under my own terms for personal reasons.
You have your own business, you don't have to tell us what it is, but you have your own business now and doing something different.
Correct.
All right. Can you tell us a little bit about your educational background?
I graduated from the University of Central Florida in 2013 with a Bachelor's of Science in Forensic Science, as well as a minor in chemistry. In June of 2013, I was hired on by the Florida Department of Law Enforcement in Orlando as a forensic technologist in the Firearms section. From there, I went through a 6-month training program with the Florida Department of Law Enforcement. After working as a forensic technologist until May of 2014, I was promoted to Crime Laboratory Analyst Trainee in the Tampa Bay Regional Operations Center of the Florida Department of Law Enforcement.
Have you testified as an expert in the past?
Yes.
Okay. And what have you testified as an expert to?
Both firearm function and firearm identification.
And have you done that in several counties within the state of Florida?
Yes.
And what counties have you testified as an expert in regarding firearm identification?
Lee, Collier, Pinellas, Hillsborough, Hernando, Polk, and Marion counties.
And as part of your duties and responsibilities with the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, do you do what's called functionality tests with firearms?
Yes.
And if you can, just very briefly describe what that entails, and then I'm going to have you actually, if you can, what would it help you to show the members of the jury with our evidence?
Yes.
Okay. May I have the witness set now? All right, this is what's already been admitted as State's Exhibit number 8. First of all, I'm looking at the packaging. Do you have your initials on the packaging?
May I see? Yes, I do.
All right, and that just indicates that this accompanies your possession at the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, and you examine the firearm.
Yes.
Okay. Can you explain to the members of the jury, first, when an item of evidence comes into the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, where does it go?
The evidence will typically be received by the evidence section in the Florida Department of Law Enforcement. There's a secure vault with limited access, and this is where the paperwork and also individual numbers for each item of evidence will be generated. It'll be housed there until it's ready to be worked by the analyst. Once it's ready, myself would go to the evidence the evidence section requesting the evidence and bring it back to my secure working area to process the evidence. Once I'm done, I'd return it back to the evidence section.
All right. Is everything fairly controlled, I'd imagine, at the Florida Department of Law Enforcement?
Yes, whenever there's an evidence transaction, it will be recorded in our internal computer database.
And how do analysts get assigned? Is it random? Do you get any particular cases?
It's through our supervisor.
All right. So in this particular case, you were asked to examine a particular firearm that states Exhibits number 8 and do a functionality test?
Yes.
Okay. And explain to the members of the jury how you go about doing that.
Once I receive the evidence, I'll bring it back to my secure working area. From there, I'll be noting the exterior packaging, and as I open up, I will record each layer of packaging, marking them with my case number, exhibit number, and my initials. Once I reach the evidence, I will then mark the evidence with the case number, exhibit number, and my initials. From there, I'll begin filling out pertinent information. So with a firearm, it would be the make, the model, the caliber, serial number, and other information that I gather from the gun. Once that's complete, I then move to a safety and function check. This will make sure that the gun is in a proper functioning fashion and that I could test fire it. Once I deem that it is safe to test fire, I'll bring it to the indoor controlled range at FDLE. I would test fire the firearm, collect any fired components, and bring them back to my working area.
Okay. When you do a functionality test, I guess with this particular firearm, did you find any difficulties with the firearm? Was there anything that wasn't working?
No, the firearm functioned properly.
And in addition to doing a functionality test, were you given other items of evidence to examine and evaluate with respect to the firearm?
Yes, I also received a fired bullet and a fired cartridge case. After collecting my test fires, I then compared those test exhibits to the questioned exhibits that were submitted to me.
Okay. With respect to examining the fired shell casing, were you asked to determine whether or not the fired shell casing came from the firearm that you're holding?
Yes.
Okay. And can you briefly explain to the members of the jury how you go about that identification process?
We use what's called a comparison microscope. This microscope has 2 viewing areas. These areas are combined into one image so I can view 2 items at the same time. I'm evaluating the scratches or the signature that are both on the bullets and on the cartridge cases to see if they are in fact from the same firearm or not.
Okay. I'm showing it's already been admitted as State's Exhibit number 11. Do you see your initials on this box?
Yes, I do.
All right. And looking at State's Exhibit number 11, is this the spent shell casing that you were asked to examine?
Yes.
And are your initials on this as well?
Yes.
Okay. What did you find when you examined this shell casing and compared it to that particular firearm?
When comparing the submitted cartridge case to test fires that I generated, I found that they were fired in the same firearm.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about the test fires. Where did the test fire rounds come from?
In this case, I used some from our laboratory stock ammunition. I also used some of the submitted ammunition in the case.
Okay, so you were told that there were rounds that were associated with this case, and you actually used some of those rounds as well.
Correct.
All right, you can have a seat. Can you explain to the members of the jury the type of firearm that's there? If you can just describe what exactly that firearm is.
Would you like me to remove it from the packaging?
I'm sorry?
Would you like me to remove it from the packaging?
Yes, please.
So this is what's called a semi-automatic pistol. Essentially, for each pull of the trigger, you will have one shot fired, and then it will be ready to shoot again unless the ammunition is either removed or exhausted. The way that this gun would work, there would be a magazine. This magazine is essentially a black box with a spring that's pushing upwards on the ammunition. It's inserted into the base of the firearm, here in the frame. And once it's in position, the slide would be released and pulled forward through a strong spring located in the front of the firearm. This would take the first cartridge, which is a unit of ammunition, off the top of the magazine and feed it into the chamber. At this point, the gun's ready to fire. When the trigger's pulled, it will release an internal striker hitting the back of the cartridge. Now, each cartridge is comprised of four main components: a pressure-sensitive primer, gunpowder, a cartridge case, which holds everything together, and a projectile. That pressure-sensitive primer will be detonated from the strike of the striker. Once that's detonated, that small explosion will cause all the gunpowder to burn rapidly and cause a large explosion. The projectile or projectiles would be forced down and out the barrel, and the forces would push that cartridge case rearward up against the gun. This causes the slide to overcome the spring force and move rearward. Using different mechanisms inside the gun, that cartridge case would be then kicked out of the gun, landing wherever. From there, the spring would then overcome the rearward force, pulling the slide back forward and stripping the next cartridge off the top of the magazine and into the barrel, ready to fire.
And you mentioned the magazine. May I approach the witness?
You may.
I'm showing it's already been admitted to evidence as State's Exhibit number 6. You see your initials on this bag?
Yes, I do.
All right, and you were talking about a magazine. Did you actually examine that magazine as well?
Yes, I did.
Did you make sure that magazine fit into, what was the make and model of that firearm?
This is a Glock Model 23 in a .40 Smith & Wesson caliber.
Okay. Did you make sure that that magazine actually fit with that particular firearm?
I used this magazine to test fire the firearm.
Okay. And you indicated that there were other rounds. I'm just going to show you what's already been admitted as State's Exhibit 31. Do you recognize your initials on the outside of the bag and then as well on the interior box?
Yes, I do.
And are those the rounds that came with the firearm and some of the rounds that you used in order to test fire it?
They were representative as coming from the firearm, and I did test fire some of them.
And again, the firearm was working perfectly fine, correct?
I didn't find any issues with the firearm.
Now, you indicated that you were given a bullet as well, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. On occasion, can you determine if a particular bullet was fired from a particular weapon?
Yes.
And how do you go about doing that? What type of analysis do you do?
At FDLE, there is a large water tank. This is a steel-lined tank, just full of typical tap water. When the gun is fired, the bullet is fired into this water tank. The water slows the bullet down to a rest and will fall to the ground. We then collect the bullet and would bring that back to our working area. Using the comparison microscope, we would evaluate the different signatures that could be on these bullets. From there, we would then compare to the evidence and determine whether or not it was or was not fired from the same firearm.
Did you attempt to do that in this particular case?
I did.
Okay. And were you able to do anything with the bullet in this case?
In this case, I was not able to determine whether or not the bullet was or was not fired from the gun, just to due to a lack of the signature reproducing.
Okay. Was there anything at all you were able to determine about the bullet in this case?
I could determine that the caliber class of the bullet was a 40 or 10 millimeter caliber class.
I was going to ask you about terminology, if you know or don't know about it. If someone were to say that one was left in the pipe, have you ever heard that terminology before?
Yes.
Okay, and what would that mean? Where was a bullet or a round of ammunition left if someone said one was left in the pipe?
So typically, now it is a slang term, but typically what that would mean is that an unfired cartridge, a ready-to-use round of ammunition, was still in the chamber of the firearm.
Have a moment, Your Honor. Do you know the maximum amount of ammunition that clip can hold?
I believe I recorded it down as stating 13.
13? Okay, thank you. I don't have any further questions.
Any cross-examination? Briefly, Your Honor. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
Did I hear you correctly that you actually couldn't make a match in this case as to the gun and the bullet?
For the bullet, I was not able to make a conclusive determination.
Okay. Did you conduct an examination of the firearm? I heard you say that it was functional.
Yes,
Okay. Did you measure the trigger pull gauge on the gun?
I did not.
Why not?
Due to FTLE procedural, I was not able to measure the trigger pull. That would be performed by a different analyst.
So you don't have the qualifications to do that, or is it just a different entity that handles that?
The trigger pull mechanism that FTLE uses requires specialized training, so I was not trained on that.
Okay. So you weren't qualified to do that analysis?
Correct.
Did you pass it on to someone else so we know what the pound of pressure was necessary to pull the trigger?
I did return the firearm to the evidence section with the intent of going to a different analyst for the trigger pull.
Okay. And what did that analyst come up with? Do you have that report?
I don't have that report, and I was not present during the examination.
So you have no idea what the trigger pull pressure is on this gun? How many pounds of force?
I did not measure it, no.
Okay. Do you know what the range is for a pistol for the trigger pull?
I can speak to experience, specifically for the Glock Model 23. I do not know the manufacturer specifications.
So you don't know?
Not the manufacturer specifications.
And why is that measurement important? What is it used for?
That measurement would indicate whether a gun's working correctly or not. It would indicate the ability of the gun to discharge from light hits, among other things.
So it could be a hair trigger, or it could be a 12 pounds of force necessary to pull the trigger, correct?
A hair trigger would be, that's not a defined term, a hair trigger, but a hair trigger would be something that would be noted down, because that would be a sign of not functioning correctly.
Okay, so this gun didn't have a hair trigger, correct?
Again, it's not a defined term what a hair trigger is.
All right, well, it did have 1 pound of force, let's say.
I didn't measure it, so I can't say if it was 1 pound.
All right, no further questions. Thank you.
Any redirect?
You indicated that you test fired this firearm?
Yes.
Okay. And you test fired firearms in the past?
Yes.
Testify as an expert in that, correct?
Yes.
Done that many, many times?
I've test fired, I would estimate around 1,000 firearms.
All right. And when you test fired this firearm, was there anything about test firing it that gave you the impression anything at all was wrong with this firearm?
No.
All right. I don't have any further questions.
Anything else, defense?
Nothing wrong with the firearm, but nothing in terms of the force needed to pull the trigger, correct?
I did not measure it, so.
No other questions. Thank you.
All right, thank you, sir. You may step down. All right, members of the jury, that's probably enough for one day. I said we would try to finish a little before 5. It's about 4:46, according to my computer over here. So be back tomorrow in time to start right at 8:45 again. And again, the same instructions that I gave you before about making sure that you don't hear or see or read anything about the case. Any questions or anything? All right, so please leave your notepad down on the chair along with the pen, and we'll see you tomorrow at 8:45. All Excellent. All right, anything we need to talk about at this point? I mean, are you going to,
We're gonna do,
depose?
Mr. Rosenwasser is gonna do the death penalty.
All right. And then, I don't think we need to have a discussion about it before we start in with the witnesses tomorrow, but I guess we'll have to have a discussion about what's admissible and what's not at some point. Maybe over an extended lunch, or maybe not. So that order that you have, is that from Hillsborough County, Mr. Rosenwasser?
Yes, I think the case was State of Florida versus Covington. And in that order, it indicates that he could not give an opinion as to whether or not someone was under the influence of a controlled substance.
All right, and that's from a circuit court judge?
Yes.
All right. All right, so it's not an
Well, you know his
appellate,
testimony, I don't.
okay. It's not an appellate opinion or anything, it's a circuit court judge over there. All right, and then, and I guess we'll have to think about what your expert can testify about as opposed to their expert, right? So I don't know if you're gonna try to get in the same thing that they're trying to get in, that you're trying to prevent them to get in.
Well, they have different qualifications, so I guess we'll just have to
All right,
see
so,
what they're gonna say.
so, Mr. Buffington's a pharmacologist, what's your witness? Do you know?
Forensic toxicologist.
Head of the toxicology department at the University of Florida.
All right, well, those things are different. Okay. All right, we'll see you tomorrow at 8:45.